Our sermon text for today is found in the book of John, chapter 19, verses 14 through 18, which says, it was the day of preparation for the Passover. It was about noon. "Here is your king," Pilate said to the Jews, but they shouted, Take him away and crucify him." "Shall I crucify your king?" Pilate asked. "We have no king but Caesar," the chief priests answered. Finally, Pilate handed him over to them to be crucified. So the soldiers took charge of Jesus. Carrying his own cross, he went out to the place of the skull, which in Aramaic is called Golgotha. There they crucified him, and with him 2 others, one on each side, and Jesus in the middle. This is the word of the Lord. There we go. There's a part of every person, I think, that likes to see justice. We want to see justice served. And I think evidence of this is found in the fact there's a huge genre of video online called instant karma or instant justice videos. These are videos in which a crook or a bully or a thief gets what they deserve, but they get it right away. There's not a long, drawn-out court process, nothing like that. A couple of these videos pop up into my mind. They're actually weirdly similar. On one video, 2 men come flying up on a red moped, and they pull up in front of a storefront. The storefront is darkened. Clearly, this business is closed. And they both come equipped with bricks. One guy winds up to throw the brick as hard as he can to get into the storefront to steal the stuff that's inside the store. And he throws it super hard, but it bounces off. So his buddy, not to be outdone, winds up even harder and throws it with all of his might at that window, but he misses the window and he hits his own friend in the back of the head, knocks him out cold. And he tries to get his friend to get up and get on the motorcycle, but the guy is out cold. They're busted. Instant justice. Another one, like I said, weirdly similar. Someone walks up to a storefront and they have a big rock and they hold it and they throw it at the window and it bounces off and hits them and knocks them out, and they lay there until they get arrested. Instant justice. They immediately got what they deserved. We like seeing justice being served. In our lesson today, we see a courtroom scene, but where you'd think a courtroom is supposed to have justice, but in the courtroom, the only innocent person is the only one being punished. I think as much as we enjoy seeing instant justice, we have just as strong of a reaction to seeing injustice. When we see injustice, it bothers us. When we see someone who is completely innocent or someone who can't fend for themselves being hurt, it truly makes our stomach goes in knots and it bothers us. Sadly, as I said in the introduction to the service, and as I'm going to say now, we are the ones who are responsible for Jesus' suffering. We are the ones responsible for the injustice that's going on in the courtroom. We are just like the Israelites shouting, "Take him away." Let me paint a picture here of this courtroom. We've got Pontius Pilate standing up on his steps, prim and proper, looking every bit the Roman official he is. And behind Jesus is this crowd of hundreds of angry Jews. And there stands Jesus in the middle. It's been a long few hours for Jesus. In the past few hours, Jesus has been betrayed by one of his very best friends for what amounts to a few $1,000s. He's been denied by Peter. He's been beaten. He's been flogged. I think sometimes we read through those words, he was flogged and crucified, and we're like, oh, that must have been rough. But maybe you've heard this before, but there was something called a mercy flogging. This is to help us understand how brutal of a punishment that was. And remember, he's going to be flogged because Pilate, if you remember last week's Passion reading, I find nothing wrong with this man, so we'll just have him flogged. So flogging. There's something called a mercy flogging. A mercy flogging would be if you died before the flogging finished. They would say that was a merciful thing. If you made it all the way to the end, that was bad. And Jesus had made it all the way to the end, and there he stood. So you can imagine how he looked. And we see Pilate say to the Jews, do you really want me to crucify your king? He said, here is your king. And they said, take him away and crucify him. And he said, do you really want me to crucify your king? Now, you don't have to know much about the history of the Romans and the Israelites and the Israelite captivity. You don't have to know much about that to know that the Israelites didn't like the Romans. They didn't like Pontius Pilate, and they certainly didn't like Caesar, but they were laying it on pretty thick. They said, "We have no king but Caesar." They're willing to say whatever they can to get what they want. So Pilate acts in a spineless way. He hands Jesus over to be crucified, even though, if you remember last week, he said again and again and again, "I find nothing wrong with this man." He sent him off to be crucified. There, Jesus on Golgotha was placed in between two criminals. And this might seem like an insignificant detail, but it actually fulfills a prophecy. In life, Jesus wasn't a sinner, but a prophecy in Isaiah 53, verse 12, said that he would be lumped together with sinners. Isaiah 53, verse 12, written 700 years before this happened. "Therefore, I will give him a portion among the great, and he will divide the spoils with the strong. Because he poured out his life unto death and was numbered with the transgressors, for he bore the sins of many and made intercession for the transgressors." So that little phrase in there especially, he was numbered with the transgressors. So though Jesus wasn't numbered among the transgressors in his life to fulfill this prophecy, he was numbered put in the middle amongst sinners. There are certain people throughout history who are infamous villains. People who have earned that reputation of international awful villains. And when I say that, I'm sure that a couple of names probably pop up into your head of infamous villains. People like Adolf Hitler or Mussolini or Genghis Khan or Benedict Arnold. People who did some pretty bad things. They killed millions of people based on racist ideologies. They killed millions of people out of greed. They stabbed their country in the back. They've earned their reputation, haven't they? The reason they're internationally despised is because of the things they've done. The hatred that the world feels towards these people is so well earned. But as I was reading through this lesson and thinking about it, I couldn't help but to think, what did Jesus do to land on that list? What did Jesus do to land on that list and be treated like a villain, to be hated? What did Jesus do for the Israelites to hate him? Jesus had traveled around teaching and preaching a message of love and a message of forgiveness. He had fed thousands of people. He had raised people from the dead. He had healed people, cast out demons. He had done so many things. So what did he do to be so hated? I think an important question for us to think about and for us to ask ourselves during Lent, but also all the time, is the same question that I just asked of the Israelites. Which is, what did Jesus do to make them hate him so much? What did Jesus do to make us hate him so much? I think that hearing that can make us uncomfortable. Hate Jesus? How can I hate Jesus? I'm in church on a Wednesday night of all nights. I don't hate Jesus. And where our mouth is quick to defend us, our actions tell an incredibly different story. If week after week after week go by and you don't really have time to go to church or to go to Bible study or to read God's word or to offer up a prayer, what does that say about Jesus? Do those actions say, "Jesus, I love you"? Or do they say the exact opposite of that? When we come to church and we hear this incredible message of forgiveness and love, this gospel that Jesus tells us in Matthew 28 to go and share with all the world, and we leave church and we don't tell a soul. Come to think of it, when was the last time we invited someone to come hear the gospel? When we treat the gospel and Jesus' commands like that, what are we saying? Are we saying, "Jesus, I love you"? I don't think so. I think that we're saying the opposite. When things in our life go wrong big time, monumentally wrong, life-changing, maybe life-ending kind of wrong, who so often is the first to receive blame? Do we sometimes lift angry eyes to heaven and say, "Jesus, didn't you promise to care about me? Jesus, didn't you promise to take care of me? Where are you now?" And our anger is aimed at Jesus. When we make Jesus the punching bag for the problems brought on by ourselves and brought on by the sinful world, are we saying, "Jesus, I love you"? No. We're saying the opposite. We're saying, "Jesus, I hate you." In our lesson today, a lot of times when pastors go and dig into a text, we try to find Jesus' active obedience and Jesus' passive obedience. In active are the things that he says. And in our lesson, you'll note as it's recorded for us in this section, Jesus doesn't say a word, so we get to see an incredible amount of things being said with just his actions. So despite the fact that the Israelites were shouting, "Take him away and crucify him," despite the fact that in our day-to-day life we are making Jesus a last priority, we're making Jesus something that we're kind of ashamed to share, we make Jesus the punching bag for our self-induced problems, Jesus quietly says in his words or in his actions, "I love you." By facing that, by going to the cross, by being crucified, he is saying in the most powerful way possible that I love you. The whole NPH, Northwestern Public University, the people who gave us this, it's the whole theme is 3 words of truth. And we were all the pastors were assigned 3 words. And in my 3 words, you'll see here on the cover, and you'll see here, and you'll see by the sermon, is take him away. But those aren't the 3 words that I want you to walk away remembering today. I want you to remember the 3 words that were the response to that, take him away. And that's Christ's 3 words, I love you. Every now and then you'll see a phrase, I like to call them refrigerator magnet phrases, nice little passages or maybe vaguely sounding Christian statements that we put on our refrigerator to make us feel better. Usually I think that they're silly, but sometimes you see one, which is maybe why it's a good thing to have them. Sometimes you see one that really sort of changes the way you think. A few years ago, during my vicar year, my pastor told me this one. He said, there is nothing you can do to make Jesus love you less, and there's nothing you can do to make Jesus love you more. And that really affected me in how I view Jesus, how I view myself, how I view my relationships with other people. Now, if there was ever a need for a proof passage of those statements, it would be this section today, right? Really, if people literally shouting, crucify him, and treat him like a villain for doing nothing, and murdering him is not enough to make him love them or love us any less, there truly is nothing we can do for him to love us less. And the second part of that little phrase I think is equally important. There's nothing that we can do to make him love us more. That's because he loves us perfectly already. He loves us just the right amount, and there's nothing we can do on either side of the ditch to make Jesus love you less. So today, as you leave tonight and as you get ready for Holy Week, I want all of these words that are hard for us to hear, like take him away and crucify him, hear those words, but let those words ultimately be drowned out by Jesus' words. I love you. Amen. Please rise.